Hi Copic fans, welcome to Copic in the Craft Room. It's Michelle Houghton here, and I have a fun card that I'm going to put together today, and the video is going to feature the coloring of this cute little image from Dare to Be Artsy. I actually posted this card on my blog and on the Dare to Be Artsy blog a couple weeks back, but I hadn't had the chance to edit the video of coloring this little bear. So she is a two-part stamp in that the image of the bear is one piece of the stamp, and then the little message on the flags is a second stamp. So I used a second color of ink to stamp that out. I don't have a whole rainbow of inks, and so this is one I happen to have. So I'm going to use that color to match things like her bow and the trim on her dress. The beauty of Copics is I can pretty much match just about anything. So I've got some colors picked out there to the left, and I'm going to start with the bear's fur. And I'm going to keep this pretty loose so she looks like she's a fuzzy teddy bear. Very cuddly, because obviously she's giving out hugs today. So I'm going to use a series of E7s. So that 70 range with the E7s, and that tends to have a little bit of a purplish undertone or mauve undertone. So I'm going to start with E70, and we're going to just get her all colored up. So I'm starting with that base coat, and for this I am going to go ahead and fill her all the way in. I'm not looking for a completely smooth texture, and I know already, or smooth blend, sorry. I know already that I'm going to come back and add texture on top and leave it textural because I want her to look fuzzy. So this is not super sped up. This is pretty close to real time. It's not real time, but it is pretty close. I'm doing really one light coat of ink. I am doing some circular strokes, so it gets a little bit better, but it's not totally even. If you look real closely, it's kind of modeled to start. On her little nose, I added colorless blender first and then came in with that E70 next. I want to keep this lighter than the rest of her fur, so I'm attempting to do that by putting the E0 or the colorless blender down first. So E71 is next, and one of the things you have to be real cautious of when you do something like this and you want to add textures, you do need to let it dry a little bit. So you're going to see a first of the few places that I add this, there's a little bit of bleeding happening with that E71. As I get going and the ink is drying, I have a little bit better effect with those little short flicks. So I'm working way up on the tip of that brush nib, and I'm doing these little short flicks. And I'm coming in from the outer edge a little bit, just because I know she's a rounded, kind of spherical head. Going on the inside of her ears, and I went right up under her nose on her snout, underside of her arms. Just a real general lighting setting in this case. I'm not doing anything fancy, not coming in from one side or the other necessarily, more of a central lighting situation. Pulling that in a little bit further before I move on to one more color. And then E77 is next. Now this is a pretty decent jump, but it works. And again, because I'm trying to leave a texture on this, it's actually okay to have that kind of contrast. I'm not going to go back and try to blend this smooth. So I'm emphasizing this little seam down the front of her face. And part of that is because she's a teddy bear. She's not a real bear. So they've actually got those seams in places. And so I'm kind of emphasizing the fact that she's a teddy bear. Coming up under her arms again. The underside we know is going to be a little bit darker. Under her feet, under her the hem of her dress, because they're going to be a little shadow there from the dress hanging over her legs. But again, these little small flicks, and I really, for the most part, I'm going to leave that. I want to see that texture. So I'm going back in with the colorless blender in a few spots just to lighten up those light areas. Not a lot, just a little, but that's also going to add another layer of texture into those original areas that didn't get the texture fur. E95 is going in on her nose just a touch. and E70 from the bottom, so just to darken it up so it's not quite so peachy and bright, and E77 as well. And then I come back with the E95 again. That softens that. It gives it, even though she's a teddy bear, I still don't want it to like be glaring pink nose. BG32 is going to be her bow. And again, this is where I'm trying to match that banner that I created with the other ink. BG34 is going to give just a touch of shading. These aren't super high contrast colors, so it's not, doesn't have a ton of dimension to it, just a little bit. Her little overall dress I decided to do a denim on, so I'm using B91. The B9 series is one of my favorite series for denim. It's very desaturated, meaning remember when that first number is higher on most of our Copic markers, it means it has more gray in it. So that B91, that 9 being the first number, means it's got quite a bit of gray in it. Coming back in and really pushing those waves back into her dress so we can see that it ripples. That was B95, and then B97 is going to push those even further, adding more dimension to that little jumper. I'm going to hit reverse, and I come back with my B95, smooth out the edge of the B97, small circles and a few flicks to pull that color forward. I had a few more little spots with the B95 just to add a little more shape to the dress, and then B91 to smooth those out. And I'm also going to use a little bit of colorless blender. First of all, this is going to brighten those highlights. It's also going to look like it's a little bit of a stone wash or worn denim look to it. I'm decided that the little trim at the bottom of the jumper could be matching that bow and banner as well. So BG32 and BG34 in those areas, just to add a little bit of color near the bottom of the image. And really, that's just about it for the bear. I do end up adding a shadow and kind of a little bit more on her, and then adding her to some fun papers to create a card. So here's a little bit of a close-up of that texture on her face. You can see the use of the colorless blender in those lighter areas, and the card with beautiful Dare to Be Artsy papers as well. Thank you for joining me. Have a happy, colorful week.